Hey, it's Danny from ProjectManaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to explain who you should have in your project team. Now bear in mind that a project team is slightly different from what's called a project working group. Your project team is essentially the people that you are paying pretty much full time for. They're team members, you're paying for them, you're responsible for assigning tasks for them and managing them directly. Usually you have them either full-time on the project or half-time on the project, but you will be paying for them as a paid resource. Project working group is slightly wider than that, where you had different people from the business or other areas that you may not be paying for, but you'll consult with them from time to time. Sometimes you'll pay for their time a little bit, but they're not really the team members, the core team members. I'm talking about the core team members, and of course I'm talking about IT projects here. So who do you need to consider and include in your team when you're putting together your project team? So it will be a mix. It will be business people and IT people. So let's start with the IT people. And before I say that, as a foundational premise, these people amongst them, your project team, will have the required abilities and knowledge to be able to do the main tasks of the project and deliver the main things of the project. As I say, you'll need other people throughout the organization to help you get everything done in terms of understanding the impacts to the business or the customers or absorbing the change that you're delivering. But essentially your core team are going to be doing the grunt work. They're going to be doing most of the work. So as I say, you've got IT staff and you've got business people. So let's start with the IT people. Now, the main people you have in your IT project are engineers, and the majority of your engineers will be developers, coders. They will do a lot of the work, and it all depends on how big your project is, but you usually have at least 2 developing engineers on your project team. It depends on what the project is, how much software you're developing. Are you doing it from scratch, or are you just doing a general simple upgrade of a software that's already in the organization? But your developers are going to form part of your core engineering team. You may also have an IT project manager or an engineering project manager. It depends on how your organization is set up. These days, it tends to be sometimes we step away from that. We just have one project manager managing both the business side and the IT side. But sometimes you have both. You'll have an IT project manager and a business project manager. Generally, the business project manager will be responsible for the overall project, and they'll work very closely with the IT project manager. But really, the IT project manager reports into the business project manager, and the IT project manager manages the IT resources. But that's not always the case. In my case, I used to be a business project manager, and I would have work with an IT project manager, but now I'm just a general overall project manager, and I manage business and IT resources. So you may have an IT project manager. What else? So another key engineer on the project would be a DBA, or a database administrator. They're very important because, of course, they will understand how to get into their database and do queries and all kinds of stuff that is beyond my understanding, but you'll be reliant on your DBA quite a lot. So it's important to have at least half the DBA or half of their time on the project. Another engineer you might have is a specialist in connections, so they know how to connect things up, connect up the infrastructure. You might have a specialist engineer that's just about infrastructure. You may need to consult with a security engineer from time to time, but they're not usually part of the actual core team. What else do you have? That's pretty much the key engineering resources. But yeah, so the core engineering resources are going to be developers. You'll need lots of them, and you might have a full-time DBA, and then you'll have a few other areas of expertise in other engineers, like, for example, infrastructure engineers or engineers that are specialists in connections, like database connections or file transfers or batch transfers, or just connecting up the infrastructure so it's all flowing nicely. So your software, whatever you're developing, is going to sit on some kit. So it's going to have an operating system, a database, and various other infrastructure elements. So you need to make sure that all those areas are considered and you've got the right resource to be able to either implement them or change them if that's what you're doing. So that's who's typically in your IT project team. On the business side, you'll typically have a business analyst is one of the key ones. The business analyst will be there to help gather the requirements and document them in the right way and word them in the right way. They'll do a lot of analysis on the project in terms of what needs to be done. Sorry, one IT project team member I forgot to mention that's quite important, just stepping back slightly, is a functional consultant. Now, they don't actually do engineering work in the sense of coding or fiddling with the database, but they do understand those things, and they understand the functionality and the design of the thing you're building. They will usually be responsible for pulling together the documentation of the design of the software you're doing or the upgrade you're doing, and they will understand all the impacts, and they're very important for that design phase, and also in my experience, in the testing phase, when you find defects with the system or issues with the system or missed requirements, they'll need to be there to consult in order to determine how to fix those defects or put right the missing requirements. So functional consultant is another big one. Sometimes there'll be an IT architect as well, but not always. Sorry, so going back to the business side, so business analyst is key. They will help you pull together the requirements and do a lot of analysis on the project, especially impacts to the business, understanding things like, I don't know, file volumes or data volumes or sales numbers or profit numbers. So any kind of analysis that needs to be done on the business side, your business analyst will be responsible for, and you usually need them throughout most of the project. Especially at the beginning stages, you'll need them full time. Maybe during the testing phases and later stages of the project, you don't need them as much, maybe half of their time, but you should have a business analyst, like a right-hand man, on the majority of the project. Next business resource would be a business architect, and they more think about the holistic solution of what you're doing. They think about the entire estate and landscape of the business and all the systems that sit in it, and they think about what you're doing and how it's impacting the entire landscape. So they have that higher level view than the business analyst. They're pretty important, but you typically don't need as much of them as a business analyst. You might need some of their time especially at the start of the project, again in the design phase, but not so much later on. So those are the key business resources. You might have a test manager as well, someone to manage all the testing resources. That's getting rarer these days. Sometimes they're not always called test managers, they're called quality assurance people or engineers, but yeah, you'll need a test manager. If not, you'll have to do it yourself. So if you can get one, that's ideal on your project team. And then you'll need business SMEs or system SMEs. Now these are really important. They're not engineers per se. They might have some engineering or technical expertise, but they will have the system knowledge or the process knowledge of this software that you are introducing, and they'll understand all the processes that are going to be impacted by the software that you're introducing in great detail. So you'll need their expertise on the project. We call them system SMEs. Sometimes we call them business leads as well. So people in the business that are running the day-to-day operations or doing the business as usual activities that are dependent on the thing that you're changing or the thing that you are delivering. So business leads, SMEs are quite important as well. Sometimes you won't have them as core members of your team. You'll have them as satellite members, and you'll maybe consult with them from time to time. But it's always good to have at least one person full time that understands the business very well, as in a business lead or an SME on your project team. That's very handy to have that. So if you can, try and get those in place. You might need to pay for them if that's the case, because they will typically have a day job to do in the business that's not project related. So if they're going to step away from that to help you on your project, they need to backfill their role. So make sure, so you're going to have to pay for that, and make sure you give them lead time to fill that role as well. Who else is on the business side of things? So you'll probably have a project sponsor or a project exec, the person that's the overall accountable for your project. As a project manager, you are responsible for delivering the project, let's say, but accountability stops with the actual executive or the sponsor. They're usually quite senior, not always. Sometimes they are actually an executive, so very senior. Sometimes not so senior, but they'll typically be more senior than you as a project manager. And it varies on project to project and who they are and how interested they are, and whether that role has been thrust upon them to be a sponsor of the project, or whether they're truly interested and they want to drive it. A very engaged project sponsor will be very handy on the project. They can remove blockers, they can move things along. But if a project sponsor is not so interested, it can be a bit frustrating. So bear that in mind and be prepared for the worst in that situation. Okay, so that's pretty much all the business resources. So let me do a little recap of that. So on the engineering side, your project team mostly is engineers. You've got developers or software developers or coders. That's most of them. You'll have your database administrator. That's very important. You might have some other engineers that have special expertise in, for example, connections or infrastructure. You might have to consult with a security engineer as well in terms of policies and security in the organization and IT mandates that have to be adhered to. And you'll need a functional consultant as well. So an engineering person that's very good at design and understanding the functionality of the thing you're building. And that's pretty much it on the IT side, and potentially an IT project manager as well. On the business side, very important to have your business analyst to do the requirements and help with any analysis and impacts, understanding impacts. You're going to need a business architect who understands the wider holistic view of the organization and how your project fits into that. You might need a business lead, or you will need some business leads or business subject matter experts or SMEs who are experts in the process that your software will enable, or daily operations that sit on top of the software that you're delivering as well. So business lead or business SMEs, if you can get someone full-time on that to represent that area. And then your project sponsor as well. And then your test managers, and of course testers as well. So testers aren't typically part of your core project team, but you'll need testers at some point, and they're involved for so long during the testing phase, you kind of see them as team members eventually, but they're not part of the core team, although you probably will have to pay for them. When I mentioned before, if those testers are in the business, then they will have a day job they have to do and they'll have to step away from to help you on your project. So they might need to backfill their roles to help you on your project, so you'll have to pay for them. And sorry, one more resource I forgot to mention on the IT side on the project team was the actual IT testers. And they do a lot of the system testing, the early testing, to make sure the core functionality of the thing that is being built is working correctly and it's all integrated, all the elements are integrated and flowing nicely. So system integration testing, and then it's handed over to the business to do more user acceptance testing to get it in the real world and make sure it looks nice and it matches up with their processes and it's working correctly, and they can spot if any requirements have been missed. The IT engineers will just test what has been built to the requirements. So they will test that functionality exactly to the requirements and make sure that's been delivered. But the business testers will be there to say, does this actually work in the real world? Have we designed it correctly? Is it going to be fine? Okay, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this one, I am doing daily videos, so hit that subscribe button. And until tomorrow, please take care.